Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic Hypersonic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I'm here to talk to you about the first two episodes of the new animated show, Batman Caped Crusader. They released all 10 episodes of the season all at once. I've watched the first three, and I've decided to give you a breakdown and review of the first two for now, and then maybe do a season breakdown and review when I get a chance to see all the episodes. But anyway, the first episode was called In Treacherous Waters, and as it starts, a man is interrogated by some henchmen before being introduced to who seem to be the Penguin. Some criminals in the middle of moving some goods are interrupted by Batman after speculating as to whether or not he actually exists before an explosion goes off at the scene, and Batman thinks a gang war is afoot. Barbara Gordon makes a closing argument in a criminal case before contentiously discussing the case privately with less than polite prosecutor Harvey Dent. Batman infiltrates an office and gets a man's name from a file before interrogating the man while hanging him off a building over a train bridge as the train bears down, and manages to get him to finger the Penguin for the explosions. Meanwhile, on her boat, the Iceberg Lounge, Penguin, aka Oswalda Cobblepot, performs a song and dance routine at a benefit for the police, at which Commissioner and Barbara Gordon, as well as Harvey Dent, and detectives Fass and Bullock, and Penguin's two sons are in attendance, while Bruce Wayne surveys the party from a small boat driven by Alfred, whom Bruce and Batman call Pennyworth, before Bruce is dropped off to attend the party and is greeted by Dent. Rupert Thorne, also in attendance, reveals to Penguin by way of hinting that he managed to survive the latest explosion at one of his buildings, that one of Penguin's two sons tipped him off in time for him to get out before the building went down. Bruce ends up having to climb back up onto the boat from the harbor after he dives into a pool in the basement of the boat to avoid being discovered snooping by Penguin and her sons. Penguin confronts her sons over the tip-off, and the seemingly guilty one is put in a case and dropped into the harbor, but it was actually the other son who tipped off Thorne, and he goes on the run looking for shelter with Thorne, who leaves him out to dry, causing him to go to Barbara, offering to narc on Penguin. As Barbara tries to get him to the commissioner, her car is rammed and shot at by Penguin's goons, and when she and Cobblepot are pinned down with one bullet in Barbara's gun, Batman arrives and stops the thugs. Cobblepot tells the commissioner that he and they are not safe from Penguin because she has a giant cannon on her boat, and police headquarters is evacuated as Batman approaches the boat in the Bat Sub before confronting Penguin and her goons as Penguin loads the cannon intent on blowing up Police HQ. The Coast Guard arrives as Batman and Penguin fight hand-to-hand before the cannon fires and destroys Police HQ. In the wake of the explosion, Barbara tells the commissioner she saw Batman, who tells Alfred he feels he made a mistake bringing down the Penguin because now no one is keeping Thorne in check. So I didn't think too much of this episode, unfortunately. There were elements of it that I liked, and those elements were largely basically ripped off from Batman the Animated Series, the best Batman animated show to ever exist, and one of the best animated shows overall to ever exist. From, the opening titles to the music, to the art style, to the aesthetic, which, covers things like how the cars look, how the characters are drawn, and how they dress and accessorize, how interiors look, in buildings and whatnot. And I liked Batman's voice, but there again, it was sort of an imitation of Kevin Conroy. And, to one degree or another, the Batman voice has been the gruff voice like this since the original Batman movie, because Michael Keaton kind of originated that, because before that, there had only been animated Batman and live-action TV Batman, and the voice was just, a straightforward voice. Whereas in the Batman film in 1989, Michael Keaton kind of gave it a little bit of rasp. But in terms of animation, Kevin Conroy was the originator of that. And so, it's just another element of that series that this series was copying, although it's not the only Batman venture to do that. I thought the action was good. I thought that the editing was good, but I didn't think this episode was anything special. And I have to tell you that I didn't like Oswalda Cobblepot. Not because she's a woman, not because it makes Penguin a woman, but because, first of all, she does a song and dance, which I don't think Penguin would do. So that was very out of character for the character of the Penguin. And I also didn't like the whole aspect of Penguin having kids. That was never a thing. And it changed the character to me and just reminded me of other characters in comics that are not the Penguin. So I didn't care for that. Maybe as the series goes on, if we see the Penguin again, it'll be different. But for the moment, I didn't care for that aspect of the episode. But let's move on to the second episode. It was called And Be a Villain. And as it starts, a woman named Yvonne Francis is dropped off by Bruce Wayne after a date. And Bruce is later questioned by Detective Montoya because just after being dropped off, Miss Francis was menaced by an unseen assailant and is missing. And Bruce acts like a bit of a dick to Montoya to the point where he indirectly and then directly offers her a bribe as his lawyer, Lucius Fox, arrives and ends the interrogation. Montoya then questions Miss Francis' coworker, actor Basil Carlo, about her, and he says he's not seen her in a while, though Montoya learns that wasn't true, before finding Carlo himself dead in his home as Batman confronts Carlo's assailant, a disfigured man, at the scene and chases him across some fire escapes and rooftops before the man gets away when Batman is forced to let him go to save a civilian put in danger during the chase by the man. Meanwhile, Miss Francis wakes up chained to a bed on a bedroom set somewhere. The man then kills a studio head, and Batman studies a scarf he grabbed off the man in the very much analog Batcave, learning that the man got it from the studio wardrobe department. Montoya questions more of Francis's coworkers and learns that Basil was in love with her and that despite being a great actor, never got lead roles because of his not so much leading man appearance, which he'd been trying to improve with an alternative medicine type makeup or skin cream treatment, which wasn't working, at the hands of the studio makeup artist. Montoya interviews another actor and he winds up dead and found by Batman along with the studio head, after Batman confronts the man and fights him Errol Flynn style on a movie set. Montoya then interviews the makeup man, ending up losing a fight with him and discovering that he has a malleable face and is in fact not the makeup man. The man then confronts Montoya and explains to her in front of Miss Francis how the treatment turned him into Clayface and that he faked his own death by turning the makeup man into himself. So of course, this is Basil Carlo. Batman discovers the disguised makeup man's body in the morgue, and upon realizing it isn't Basil's body, follows the trail to Clayface's lair and fights him as Montoya gets out of the chair she was tied to, and then rescues Miss Francis before a pendulum blade swings low enough to kill her. Batman defeats Clayface as detectives Bullock and Flass make a late arrival to the scene to apprehend Clayface, before Batman escapes through the ceiling window that he came in through, after which Montoya discovers a bug that had apparently been placed on her, and knowing that he's still listening, tells Batman they aren't done with each other. And that's where the second episode ended. And I found that I liked the second episode much better than the first episode. I thought it was a much better written story. Of course, I knew early on that it was the origin story of Clayface, and I thought that that story was much more compelling than the story of the first episode. I continue to like the elements that I mentioned before. I particularly liked the Errol Flynn nod, the fight scene that was, a sword fight actually, which was, a nod to Errol Flynn and the Errol Flynn, era of films, classic Hollywood era. But again, I think it's because this very heavily mimicked, the way Batman the Animated Series was done in the 90s. It just felt like a new episode of that show, though, of course, that show had its own Clayface origin story. So I liked it, but it didn't do anything to set itself apart from an episode of Batman the Animated Series. And, as much as I loved Batman the Animated Series, I was hoping this series would be something different than Batman animated shows we've seen before. And there have been a number of them, a couple of which I liked, as well as one that I didn't really like. But it's really, so far, been largely a clone of Batman the Animated Series. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I did watch the third episode. That was called Kiss of the Catwoman, which included a performance by Christina Ricci as Catwoman, and they used the classic Catwoman comic suit and the Catmobile, which I thought was cool. And Harleen Quinzel is in it, not yet Harley Quinn, still just the therapist, and that was good. And I might talk more about this episode in a future video, but just to sort of give you a couple more things that I've liked so far about the series, it would be those things. But overall, between the two episodes, I suppose when it comes down to individual elements, I liked more than I disliked. And I do want to note that the way they're playing Bruce Wayne in the series is the Bruce Wayne that we've seen before in other Batman media that's kind of a dick. Which in the past has been a way that Bruce has been depicted because it's been Bruce's way in those instances of throwing off suspicion from him being Batman. He plays up the dick angle of being a wealthy playboy. And so they've included that, which I kind of don't like. And even Harvey Dent in this is kind of a dick. And I'm not in love with that. As I said, I didn't care for the female penguin, but not because she's female. I could deal with that. I just didn't like the way this character is characterized. And, I found it interesting that Commissioner and Barbara Gordon are Black. And that, along with Penguin being gender swapped, is going to piss off a lot of people in the anti-woke crowd, as well as the fact that Harley Quinn is Asian. So we're going to hear from that crowd about that stuff, none of which, of course, bothers me at all. So just get ready for that. But that's really it for now. I'm going to watch the rest of the series over the next few days. And like I said, I may do another video talking more about the rest of the season once I've had a chance to do that. But for now, I'm going to get out of here. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.